Suho was given a certificate of honor, just as 𝐅𝐢𝐞 made him an insane offer. He wanted the boy to forget the Hero Association entirely and work exclusively for him as a hunter for his guild. He reminded Suho that the role of a hero was a boring one, filled with tons of responsibilities that 𝐅𝐢𝐞 himself couldn't care less about.
However, the confident young man flatly refused his offer, content with his choice to become a hero.
Despite those defiant words,
𝐅𝐢𝐞 felt as if he'd just robbed of his fun and moved on to the next cadet.
In 𝐅𝐢𝐞's presence, Noun seemed flustered as he appeared to recognize the girl. It turns out this man was actually her master. Well, that's what Nawoon wanted to believe, because in reality, 𝐅𝐢𝐞 never considered her his student. Her father had simply begged him to train her, and that was how they ended up in this situation. His brutally honest truth crushed her enthusiasm, much to our boy's delight. That woman deserved to be knocked down a peg.
And then came the final cadet. 𝐅𝐢𝐞 seemed to take an immediate dislike to Hajin, as he completely failed to recognize the ordinary-looking kid.
The first question he asked was who he even was, because he looked so bland and unmemorable. Hajin could only describe the feeling as complete indifference. It was as if his very existence was being ignored, with 𝐅𝐢𝐞 paying him no mind whatsoever. The award ceremony ended just like that, as boring as it sounds. Cadet Noun was the first to be asked for her thoughts after receiving the award. Well, after the ceremony, our boy was happier than ever. He had just received a whopping 15 million in prize money for slaying the demon. This was a godsend, as he needed every bit of it to cover his $300,000 debt. He sat alone, deciding how to invest the remaining money. His primary concern was acquiring more shares from the guild. Meanwhile, he was dying to check out the new features his laptop received after that painful update. Upon opening his laptop, he was greeted by a message detailing the updated functions.
The first was the stigma he had received. The second was internet activation.
And finally, the Book of Truth was added to his observation and reading skill. The stigma was related to what happened to his left arm, but there was almost no description for it. It only told him that he could wield magic whenever he needed to. Despite what it said, Hajin was struggling to figure out how to even activate his new ability. Just as he was thinking about activation, the stigma formed an emblem on his arm, signaling it was about to power up. Fearing he might blow something up right there, Hajin decided to take this risk back to his dorm, where no one could see him. After all, it would be a huge pain if someone found out about him. The second update was about internet activation. Hajin moved the cursor over the button and clicked it. After a moment's pause, the screen redirected him to a variety of different websites, like Law Abiding Spirit, Violent Bone Screen, and Jeremiah's Sword. Not only did he get free access to regular sites, but he also gained entry to otherwise restricted ones. Of all the sites he saw, the most important was Violet Banquet, which held everything he could possibly need. This was the most famous members-only site, acting as a hub for exchanging vital information, reward weapons, requests, and so much more. Only a handful of heroes don't use this website. Because of this, the government turns a blind eye to its shady dealings. There's an insane access fee just to enter the site. In our boy's case, all he had to do was spend 200 of his precious story points.
He makes the transaction and creates a temporary account.
Just as he's about to connect to a specific page, someone calls out to him. It's the beautiful 𝐢𝐬𝐫𝐬𝐬𝐬𝐬, the very same vice leader who spotted him.
She knows that Hajin is aware of her identity, and she remembers he was the one who vanished from the ceremony earlier. She came here specifically to give him a business card for her guild, the Sacred Grace of God. This was no ordinary offer. Even Hajin believed that receiving this card was a massive achievement in itself. Sunga had a list of critical questions for him, so she sat down, wondering if he would be willing to answer. Of course, Hajin suspected she was interested in recruiting him. She sat down and asked if he was ready to answer her questions. On camera, Sunga always appears to be the kindest person alive. But in reality, she has a completely different side. She looks down on even the most exceptional talents. She's only interested in the absolute best, acting with cold efficiency and discarding anyone she deems unnecessary. That is the true personality of Vice Guildmaster 𝐢𝐬𝐫𝐬𝐬𝐬𝐬𝐬𝐬𝐬𝐬𝐬𝐬𝐬𝐬𝐬𝐬𝐬𝐬𝐬𝐬𝐬𝐬𝐬𝐬𝐬𝐬𝐬𝐬𝐬𝐬𝐬𝐬𝐬𝐬𝐬𝐬𝐬𝐬𝐬𝐬𝐬𝐬𝐬𝐬𝐬𝐬𝐬𝐬𝐬𝐬𝐬𝐬𝐬𝐬𝐬𝐬𝐬𝐬𝐬𝐬𝐬𝐬𝐬𝐬𝐬𝐬𝐬𝐬𝐬𝐬𝐬𝐬𝐬𝐬𝐬𝐬𝐬𝐬𝐬𝐬𝐬𝐬𝐬𝐬𝐬𝐬𝐬𝐬𝐬𝐬𝐬𝐬𝐬𝐬
game-changer for Hajin's future success.
So, before she could even begin, our boy cuts her off, coldly declaring he has nothing new to say to her. Faced with this stunning rejection, Sunga desperately tries to clear the air.
She wanted to make it clear that she was the one showing special interest in him, reminding him that she is the vice leader of Korea's top guild.
Hajin seemed to acknowledge her rank, but he brushed it aside, knowing she was here for personal reasons. He was certain Sunga was only here because she had reviewed the footage of him using a light attribute shot. It wasn't that she genuinely wanted to recruit him right now. Instead, she wanted to satisfy her own idle curiosity with a barrage of questions.
That's why our guy is playing hard to get, making it seem like he holds all the cards.
By doing this, he could manipulate her emotions and finally gain her genuine interest instead of the fleeting curiosity she felt now. He makes a final power move, declaring he's leaving immediately, which leaves Sunga utterly speechless. Turning back to his stigma's potential,
He discovered more information on how to use it.
When his total story points cross a certain threshold, his perception stat would level up, and another stroke would be added to his stigma.
it also specified that Hajin could activate its power whenever he desired, and after a single use, it would recharge over a 24-hour period. To test his newest ability, Hajin focused on creating a dagger with his magic. Suddenly, the stigma manifested a mythical blade from thin air. The dagger was real. As Hajin moved it, he could feel it was battle-ready. The problem with magic is that it's a stat heavily influenced by one's innate talent and knowledge. Since Hajin appeared in this world with no background to speak of, he naturally assumed he'd be unable to use magic, but he was thrilled to have found his own way through the power of his stigma. The last thing he wanted to test was the Book of Truth. It was supposed to enhance his existing observation and reading skills. Hajin thought for a moment and decided to call out the ability's name. This ability activated his stigma once more, materializing a book that contained all truth. The book's mystical energy allowed Hajin to find the answer to any question as long as it was within its magical scope. How insane is that?
Even the author had to pause for a second, to process what he just read, to check if it was lying to him.
He asked about his height. It turns out our boy is a short king, standing at 174 centimeters, or just over 5'8" in freedom units.
Using the Book of Truth consumes one story point for every question asked.
Suddenly, Hajin's smartwatch began beeping frantically. It was a sudden emergency alert from the school.
A group message appeared from someone asking for a student's location. Seeing this red emergency notification, our boy wondered what this was all about.
He thought that this might be the trigger for the second major incident destined to happen in the main story.
The serial disappearance of Cube's cadets. This arc would involve 6 cadets vanishing without a trace. The culprit responsible for this was meticulous, covering their tracks and leaving not a single clue behind.
The investigations were useless, as the numbers just kept climbing, as if everyone was trapped in an endless game.
Hajin noted this chapter was critical, since the culprit's ultimate target was believed to be none other than Naeun herself. And now, even Hajin knew things would get messy if the co-author interfered and altered the story, potentially threatening to eliminate a main character, just like in the museum incident.
Our hero considered taking matters into his own hands to catch the criminal,
but knew that would be futile, as his interference would shatter the story's flow forever.
All he could do for now was simply wait and watch the story unfold.
The scene shifts to the training center the next day, where Suho was grabbing a drink when his friend pointed at the unfolding chaos.
While Hajin was struggling to train and build his strength, a pack of goons arrived to mock and disrupt his session, calling him a failure for being unable to lift a simple dumbbell.
Despite being in a prestigious academy, they sneered that he must have bribed his way in.
Suho, with his strong sense of justice, tried to step in, but his friend yanked him back. Suho couldn't believe the class president, Young-han, was doing nothing to stop the bullies.
But Young-han explained that Hajin had clearly angered Naeun's clique somehow, and any interference would make Suho a target as well.
He suggested they might just be testing Hajin's reaction, but Suho was in disbelief. Young-han argued that a man who could shatter a Jin's arm shouldn't fear a few amateurs.
He theorized that Hajin was deliberately hiding his true power.
But that theory crumbled, as our boy couldn't even budge the weight. He struggled pathetically before giving up entirely. Even the other failures thought he was a disgrace. Young-han began to think it was all just a fluke. That hypocrite changed his tune so fast. Regardless, Suho ignored him and rushed in to help Hajin.
The other cadets braced for an imminent brawl, and even Naeun was listening in from the sidelines.
Suddenly, their instructor appeared, roaring like a furious father.
He was enraged that they were turning his training session into a circus, and ordered everyone to gather for the test results.
The score sheet would be posted on the wall for everyone to see their rankings.
The cadets flocked to the board, only to find that many of them had been completely destroyed by the exam.
And at the very top of that brutal test stood the name of a single student.
It was none other than Kim Hajin, the same weakling who couldn't lift a dumbbell. Rachel and 𝐅𝐢𝐬𝐬 ranked second and third, respectively.
Of course, 𝐅𝐢𝐬𝐬 wasn't surprised, since he already knew every detail of the story he himself had written.
Seeing his name, a girl's sword clattered to the floor. It was Rachel, and she was utterly speechless.
She was the Princess of England, who had ranked third in the entrance exams.
There was one crucial fact about her. She had never, ever placed second on a written test.
So, to be ranked second now left her completely stunned. She stared at him as if she were seeing a ghost.
Hajin was just as shocked, unsure what to say. Let's flash back to when Rachel first entered Cube with her stellar results.
Her attendants worried for her, knowing she would soon stand among the world's greatest hero candidates.
Moreover, with everyone in her class being Korean, she would have no one to confide in. But Rachel was unbothered, feeling no anxiety, only the desire to meet the expectations placed upon her for the sake of the royal family. But today, she felt an unprecedented wave of fear, failure, and disappointment. She felt as if she had let her entire country down with her performance.
The instructor reviewed Hajin's notes, highlighting his brilliant and novel approach to phenomenological analysis.
He was even called an academic weapon, to be emulated. Now, Rachel knew that phenomenology was no easy subject to master. She doubted she could even close the gap before midterms. This distant, out-of-place boy, Kim Hajin, was outshining her while barely paying attention in class. Burning with a newfound fire and a desire to learn his secrets, Rachel began to take a much deeper interest in him. Meanwhile, at the information office, our hero was making a few queries of his own.
He had finally acquired the Book of Truth, a key that could solve all his problems. This was sure to help.
With this new ability, he could investigate anything in the world, or fill any gap in his knowledge, all for the price of a few story points. This was crucial, especially when he had nothing to his name and no real way to profit. Hajin hoped things would finally start looking up. He went to complete his agent registration, and from there planned to use his precious story points to handle the rest. Now, let's talk about the second major event looming on the horizon. Right after it occurs, the Academy's status as a secure and authoritative place will be shattered by public criticism.
It would no longer be considered a safe zone. The problem was, even with his current power, Hajin believed he was too weak to solo a magical beast. However, he had earned a huge pile of story points after Donghak lost his temper and sent his goons after him. That incident was now turning into a major advantage.
Hajin planned to use some points to guarantee his survival for the trials to come. His first order of business was to enhance his weapon's effects. Since he had a Desert Eagle, he wanted to add a transformation function that would allow it to become a sniper rifle.
I don't know about you, but a handgun that morphs into a sniper rifle sounds absolutely epic.
Hajin wondered if he was going a bit overboard with this feature.
But in the end, he committed, spending 250 story points on the added function. Instantly, his gun began to warp,
taking the beautiful golden form of a sniper rifle, a reflection of its new power.
Even he was impressed, but he thought it was far too flashy for a firearm and would attract way too much attention.
So, he reverted it to its pistol form. Next, he focused on creating a technique that would aid him. He had 3 empty slots to work with.
The difference between supernatural powers and magic, known as gifts, versus a technique, is that techniques are considered trained physical skills, not granted ones.
For a long-range weapon user, arguably the most vital skill for survival and mission success is positioning oneself in the most advantageous spot.
Therefore, the technique Hajin hoped to acquire now was all about getting him to that ideal position, to avoid all future risks.
He typed away on his laptop, configuring the technique's skills.
Finally, its attributes were ready for him to use. It was a skill he decided to call parkour, and it would make him a nimble monster on the battlefield.
This would ensure he was always on the move, never pinned down or giving away his location. For this effect, 350 points were consumed.
But strangely, our boy didn't seem to feel any physical difference. Still, he was confident that some change had taken place.
Though he couldn't feel it, his smartwatch suddenly buzzed with a notification. It was a group message.
And this time, everyone was searching for Su-yeon. The girl had become the culprit's second victim, right inside the academy.
Hajin knew that the cadets who had vanished before Su-yeon were actually murdered in cold blood by the perpetrator. This meant that the moment they disappeared, they were as good as dead.
As the author, he knew about this dangerous, shadowy villain pulling the strings from behind the scenes. He also knew who would be involved in the disappearance. Facing this gut-wrenching moral dilemma, Hajin wondered if he should really turn a blind eye to what was happening for the sake of the story and for his own personal gain.
It's a fascinating question. Let me know what you would do in the comments below. Would you be pragmatic or moral? These thoughts weighed heavily on the author, trapped in a difficult situation with no right answer. The scene shifts to an outdoor training ground on the Cube's campus. The instructor makes an announcement to the cadets, explaining they'll be participating in a special practical training session.
The cave before them is actually called an artificial dungeon, and it was created through the marvels of magical engineering.
This place contains illusions of real monsters. So, in a way,
this is the best possible training to prepare the cadets to fight real monsters in the future. That's why today they will undertake a mock dungeon raid.
However, the instructor stressed that they shouldn't take this lightly just because it's training, or else they might pay the price. A special feature of this artificial dungeon is its enormous size.
That's why the Veritas and Kroll classes will be teaming up to clear it effectively.
Each unit will send a combined squad to form a raiding party to tackle the dungeon. The instructor tells them to form their teams now.
A storm of whispers erupted as the cadets tried to link up and communicate with each other to form their teams.
Among them was Team 8, including our boy Hajin and his remaining allies, like Yona, Hazuki, and Hoyoung.
From the Kuro unit,
They had Jaden, Jin Susung, and Jin Sa, making up a team of 8 cadets in total. Inside the artificial dungeon, a host of treacherous traps lay wait for them.
Some of these traps were deliberately placed by demonic beasts, or at least, that's what Hajin suspected.
To counter the possibility of dealing with demonic humans, he had prepared a special batch of bullets just for them.
But even at this level, Hajin was confident in himself, yet wondered if he could truly survive this practical training event.
Suddenly, the system blared a critical warning, notifying him of a divergence in the original story.
This was a nightmare for the author, especially since he had no idea what the changes were. The worst part was that 3 aspects of the story had been altered in a single event.
This was, without a doubt, a warning meant for Hajin.
But he was completely in the dark about what was happening, or who was causing such changes. As the teams assembled, Hajin's greatest fear was the unknown,
while he was completely lost in thought.
His teammate from the culture unit, Kim Yuna, scoffed at him for being an idiot and ignoring the instructor. The system alerted him that Yuna's rage was escalating.
At the same time, 𝐢𝐫 met Jaden from the culture team, but she met his enthusiasm with a chillingly vacant expression.
The system reported that Jaden's growth potential had also increased based on this interaction. Finally, 𝐌𝐢𝐬𝐬𝐬𝐬𝐬𝐬𝐬 noticed a particular cadet she had seen before at the hunting club. The cadet introduced himself as Sven, with stunning blue eyes and a captivating smile. He was paired with her, but for some reason, his mental state was only deteriorating. This also meant he was dangerously vulnerable to becoming a demon's puppet during the raid.
Hajin was just baffled, wondering where all these story changes were materializing from.
And he was deeply worried as they would drastically affect the narrative. The author narrowed his focus on 2 characters he needed to watch closely. The first was Jaden from Team 8, who was supposed to be a thug-like character with a bully's disposition.
And although he possessed the qualities of a skilled cadet,
what truly disturbed Hajin was the growth potential points he had received from an unknown source. Jaden politely introduced the rest of his team, Jingu, Sujun, and Jin Sha. On 𝐢𝐫's side, she did the same, but she kept misremembering our main character's name, much to his irritation.
It was almost comical, as if she was calling him Lei Hajin, just to provoke him.
Returning to his thoughts, Hajin focused on what he should do about his second person of interest. This guy, Sven, was actually on a government scholarship, considered an elite hero candidate from Germany. There was just one crucial detail to note about this guy. He was hopelessly infatuated with 𝐌𝐢𝐬𝐬𝐬𝐬. Is it just me, or is everyone in love with 𝐌𝐢𝐬𝐬𝐬? Someone needs to check if she signed a contract with a succubus demon. Anyway, just like the other international students at the academy, Sven arrived with the goal of achieving glory and rising to the peak of success. But that remained an unfulfilled dream for him, especially when main character level talents like 𝐌𝐢𝐬𝐬𝐬, Suo, and even 𝐢𝐫 were the protagonists. Witnessing their extraordinary and brilliant abilities, Sven lost his way, and his spirit began to crumble. He had never felt true inferiority and the bitter taste of failure before coming to the academy. His insecurity had won. That's why, in a mad quest for power,
Sven had sold his very soul in exchange for the ultimate strength. Now, those were the details the author had confidently written himself. The real issue was that his transformation was now set to happen during this raid.
It had been pushed up far earlier in the timeline, and while he hoped it wouldn't have a major impact, Hajin was still on edge.
His thoughts were shattered by Jaden's abrupt greeting.
He squeezed Hajin's shoulder, telling him not to be so lost in thought. Hajin instantly shook his hand off.
Jaden quickly branded him a jerk, thinking the rumors about him must all be true. Hearing those words, Hajin realized his reputation had officially hit rock bottom.
One rumor in particular had made waves in the Obis unit, causing many to watch him with disdain.
The rumor claimed he was using his cadet status to threaten others.
But it was one of those baseless lies fabricated to ruin someone's name. However, it was pretty clear who started it, as Hajin knew it was undoubtedly related to Chong and his minions.
Looking at his so-called friends,
Hajin felt a twinge of sadness as Hazuki and Ho-young didn't even step up to help him, despite being on the same team.
In any case, the order of the teams was decided, and they would start with Team 1. Meanwhile, Jaden was trying to flirt with Yoha in every way possible.
He went on and on about how their team was now an overpowered combination. They even badmouthed Hajin as a burden.
This was ridiculous. It was as if all of his haters had gathered in a single team, and their victim was poor Hajin.
the time had finally come for Team 8 to enter the dungeon. They stepped inside, witnessing the artificial cavern in all its magnificent glory.
Together, they ventured deeper, with a confident Shedden leading the charge. Suddenly, they reached a fork in the road with multiple paths. Jan wondered which route would be the most efficient.
Jaden pointed out they had a long-range weapon user to rely on, but Hajin shattered the silence, unexpectedly suggesting they take route number 6.
His sudden interruption deeply irritated Jaden.
But strangely, Yonha seemed to trust Hajin's gut feeling and actually accepted his proposal. Her swift approval caught Hajin by surprise, and while she called him useless in front of the group, she couldn't deny that he possessed a keen eye for details.
Hajin was a bit annoyed that she had to tarnish his name just to give him a compliment, but he was fine with it, as long as they could meet Na Yuna on this path. The problem with Sven was his potential to forge a pact with the demon lurking within the cave.
Because of that, the burden would fall squarely on Na Yuna, who would have a brutal time dealing with him alone. If she were to fall now, the rest of the story would descend into chaos, as her character was vital to moving the plot forward. She was a priceless piece of the puzzle that absolutely could not be lost.
They entered Route 6, but Jaden, ever the jealous rival, called Hajin an attention seeker. Our boy simply ignored the insults, choosing to focus on the monsters ahead.
The other cadets couldn't see a thing in the suffocating darkness. But Hajin seemed to have no trouble spotting a salamander in the near distance.
He also theorized it might be some kind of dungeon switch, one that could reveal some of the dungeon's properties.
Worried, the archer figured he should try firing a light arrow to scout the situation for them. With Yana's approval, he nocked an arrow and let it fly, creating a brilliant path of light straight ahead.
To everyone's astonishment, there was indeed a salamander monster waiting for them.
Jaden was in shock, while 𝐷𝐸𝐻 ordered everyone into battle formation to take the creature down. Hajin, on the other hand, was already predicting what would happen next.
𝐷𝐸𝐻 drew her signature whip and charged in head-on. She unleashed a powerful strike at the monster, interrupting the attack it was charging from its mouth.
I am not gonna lie. This thing looks like a Pokemon.
With its mouth sealed, Hazuki and the other melee fighters rushed in to crush the monster with their powerful strikes. Since it was only a hologram, they defeated it with relative ease, suffering almost no consequences from the battle.
𝐷𝐸𝐻 heard a rumbling sound and realized the dungeon was transforming after the monster's defeat.
Hajin observed the current emanating from her whip. He was impressed. She had already tapped into her pre-awakening power.
Just as they prepared to move, Hajin tripped on a pebble and fell backward, right on top of 𝐷𝐸𝐻.
At that exact moment, a sharp projectile zipped past them, narrowly missing. It would have been a direct hit if not for his stumble.
The two of them hit the ground hard. Hajin's face was dripping with cold sweat, knowing he had just cheated death.
𝐷𝐸𝐻 tried to ignore his absurd blunder for a moment, but her temper flared, and she was ready to strike him. As she prepared to hit him, their teammates pointed to the arrow that had almost killed them just now.
It was in this moment that Hajin realized their little fall had actually allowed them to dodge a lethal poison arrow.
The scene shifts to Sven, already wounded by one such arrow, begging 𝐷𝐸𝐻 to leave him behind. Carrying his heavy body, 𝐷𝐸𝐻 screams back, "Shut up if you can't run!"
She still couldn't believe what had happened just moments before. An arrow had flown out of nowhere and struck Sven from behind. She refused to believe this was part of the training. So she had started running for her life.
Especially since this was a man-made dungeon, where a situation like this should have been impossible.
Now feast your eyes on the colossal beast she was trying to escape. This lava golem, a miniature Godzilla, was relentlessly pursuing 𝐷𝐸𝐻.
No wonder she was furious with Sven for spouting nonsense while he was injured.
Back in the artificial cave, the cadets' training was underway. They were busy fighting fire salamanders that shot beams of light from their mouths. Hajin's team was defending against them quite well, especially the ranged unit. They defended and countered with their long-distance weapons.
Hajin and 𝐷𝐸𝐻 were also quickly clearing the mess with ease. Jaden was having the time of his life, cutting down monsters by himself.
This continuous battle seemed like an easy victory for our heroes. They had yet to face a truly difficult monster, as everything so far had been nothing more than small fry.
Aside from that one poison arrow, they didn't think they'd encountered any traps to be wary of, so they pushed onward to explore deeper.
But something about that poison arrow just didn't sit right with our protagonist. He even received a notification about it from the system. He couldn't believe it. These fools still thought the arrows were just part of the training, not a genuine threat to their lives.
As his mind raced with 1,000 thoughts, a terrifyingly powerful presence suddenly materialized behind him, striking fear into his heart.
A fire salamander, glowing with immense power, was charging up a devastating blast of destruction, ready to unleash it at any second. Hajin was in utter disbelief that one of the salamanders had survived, certain they had already finished it off.
A massive torrent of flame erupted toward them, catching Yona and the others completely off guard and defenseless.
A single hit from this attack would annihilate them all.
That's when Hajin was forced to act, intervening in the battle with the magic power of his stigma.
He unleashed a one-time ability, instantly conjuring a wall of water. The stigma's power surged forth, forming a protective barrier against the raging inferno.
The blast was overwhelmingly powerful, but it ultimately faltered against the defensive might of the water barrier enveloping their team.
Its final attack spent, the fire salamander collapsed, its life force completely extinguished.
But what Hajin had just done left his teammates completely stunned. Hazuki and Hong stared wide-eyed, unable to process what they had just witnessed. They couldn't fathom how an attack that powerful could possibly be part of a mere training exercise.
That was a real, full-powered breath of fire. And even though it wasn't a direct hit, the danger had been immense.
Jedin, however, was the only one furious over the incident. He immediately grabbed Hajin, demanding why he hid his water attribute power, especially when they desperately needed it earlier.
Hajin, trying to maintain his composure, explained it was just the effect of a magic item, but Jaden wasn't buying that pathetic excuse for a second.
Yona stepped in, breaking the two of them apart.
The real concern was the fact that they'd just faced a real monster inside what was supposed to be an artificial dungeon.
Manhwa reasoned that this place was designed to simulate a traditional or normal dungeon.
This meant either one of the fire salamanders had somehow evolved, or something else entirely had caused this anomaly to appear.
For now, she pushed those details aside, confident they'd be rewarded with extra points for taking down a real monster.
With that, Manhwa took the lead once more, acting as if the incident didn't faze her in the slightest.
But deep down, she was certain Hajin was lying about the magic item excuse.
The fact that he couldn't even afford a desert eagle was proof enough he couldn't just get his hands on a rare water attribute magic item.
And while someone like Jang-hak or Suho might be capable of such a feat,
a nobody like Hajin was completely out of the question. Yona started connecting the strange coincidences surrounding him, like his knowledge of the mountain tyrant's weakness and this sudden display of magic.
She just couldn't figure it out. Why would he go to such great lengths to hide his true strength? It brought back Naeun's original theory that perhaps he was some kind of demonic human.
lost in her confused thoughts and unable to trust Hajin, Yona resolved to watch his every move.
Now, let's switch back to our girl Naeun and see how she's handling her own monstrous foe.
The megalith golem was a terrifying threat, an intermediate-grade monster that seemed absolutely unstoppable.
They assumed it had to be the dungeon boss, wondering if it was even possible for a normal team to defeat such a creature.
Their only plan was to regroup with other teams for a joint assault. But there was another pressing concern: Sven's fragile condition.
Naeun was still troubled by the poison arrow that came from nowhere. She was starting to believe this dungeon was far too advanced for cadet-level training. And Sven's condition was shown to be far worse than anyone realized.
He felt like a burden for failing his team, and with every passing moment, his mental state crumbled.
Depressing thoughts flooded his mind, making him doubt his own abilities.
He was tormented from within until a voice decided to prey upon his moment of weakness.
The voice whispered to him, asking if he desired power, especially after suffering for so long.
It promised to grant him exactly what he wanted, the power he had always dreamed of. In return, the demonic voice asked only that he abandon everything else. Faced with this tempting offer, and trapped in his own misery, Sven eagerly accepted without a second thought.
The moment he agreed, the devil snared his soul in its trap, inflicting him with agonizing, world-spinning pain.
He let out a blood-curdling scream as his body collapsed from the torment.
Naeun rushed to his side, calling to her teammates, but his cries of agony had attracted their ugly golem to their location.
It stared down at them, a silent, deadly greeting, before destroying the area with its lava.
The beast swung its colossal fist, crushing everything in its path.
The cadets were sprinting for their lives, driven by the raw fear of being crushed by a single, devastating fist. For those too slow, the monster's fist shattered the earth, launching them into the air. They were cornered, with no escape in sight. Even Naun, while supporting Sven, found herself against a cold, hard wall, every escape route cut off. Before she could even gasp for air, the horrifying creature loomed over her, its eyes glowing with malice. This was a living nightmare. No one would ever wish for this situation. Naun's mind reeled as she realized this was no training dummy, but a real monster. Faced with its overwhelming rage, a chilling realization dawned on Naun. They could actually die here, in this artificial dungeon. Just as the monster prepared its final blow, a bullet of pure mana shot out from the shadows, piercing straight through the creature's skull. Naun's eyes darted towards the direction of the shot, searching for the sniper who had just saved them. And there he was, our main character, Hajin, having saved her life for the second time. If she's still ungrateful after this, he should just let fate take its course next time. Let's rewind a few minutes to see what happened with Hajin's team. They'd hit a massive wall, much to Jaden's annoyance, as this path was supposed to lead straight to the boss.
Hajin confirmed that they were still on the right track.
In fact, they couldn't be closer, but even he hadn't predicted this dead end. Setting that aside, Hajin declared the real monster was hiding right behind it. He needed the team to smash through the wall.
Jaden bristled, furious that his leadership was challenged. Nevertheless, he unleashed a full power strike with his enchanted sword. The result: the poor guy was sent reeling from a massive shockwave. The wall was magically reinforced with a powerful defense. Even a mana-infused attack was completely useless against it. Hazuki then spotted a crevice high above the wall. Hajin believed it was their only way through.
But Jaden scoffed at the idea, calling him insane for even thinking about climbing a sheer 10-meter wall.
Realizing Jaden was all talk, Hajin decided to show them how it was done. He activated his parkour skill, his grip strengthening as his body became impossibly agile. In a flash, he twisted and launched himself upwards,
Scaling the wall like a seasoned pro until he reached the top.
Without a second glance at the team, he pressed forward alone.
Just then, a massive explosion echoed from the other side. The dungeon was shifting once again, an unforeseen variable in their plan.
Jaden was clueless about what was happening, but the terrifying truth was that a colossal lava golem had awakened and was on a rampage. This brings us back to Hajin arriving just in time to save Naun.
He was intrigued to find that the stun effect from his bullet had no lasting effect on a creature of this immense size.
He screamed for Naun to run while she had the chance. But his warning came too late. The towering monster had already found its newest target.
The color drained from our hero's face. Suddenly, being the center of attention wasn't such a great thing, after all.
Instantly, the rest of the team sprang into action, surrounding the lava golem and attacking from all sides.
But despite their fierce barrage, not a single attack even scratched the molten beast.
It stood there, an untouchable mountain of fire. Seeing her team arrive, Naun's hope surged as she began preparing a single powerful arrow.
She yelled for them to buy her some time while she focused all her power into the shot. Just as they were about to be overwhelmed, Sven appeared from the shadows, making his own dramatic entrance.
He kept the monster distracted, allowing Naun to gather even more power. Recalling her last fight, she swore this time would be different.
And then Naun unleashed her arrow of destruction. Upon impact, it completely obliterated the monster's face.
The golem's lifeless husk crashed to the ground, molten lava pouring from its head.
The cadets couldn't believe it. They had actually defeated such a ferocious monster with their combined strength. Some were already dreaming of the huge point reward they'd receive. Naun and Sven finally regrouped with them.
The others were in shock at the sheer power of Naun's finishing blow. But Hajin wasn't focused on them. His attention was solely on Sven.
He still hadn't transformed into a villain at this stage. This was a clear deviation from the original story.
A change that would undoubtedly cause ripples in the future. His transformation was inevitable, especially after the demonic pact he'd made in this very cave.
Things were about to get complicated. It was no longer a question of if he would turn on them, but when.
Naun's gaze then fell upon the boy in the distance, still catching his breath.
For a moment, her anger toward him vanished. She approached him, knowing she owed him her life, but her pride made it almost impossible to say thank you.
But finally, hearing those words from her was a victory brighter than any dungeon conquest for our hero.
He couldn't comprehend what the hell had just happened.
Stunned, he asked her to repeat himself, which only annoyed her more as she snapped that she wouldn't say it again.
Her entire life had been defined by tragedy. The first blow struck when she was just 6 years old.
The poor girl lost her mother at the hands of a villain, a cruel fate that forged her unwavering resolve to one day become a hero.
While other children were taught to laugh and play, 𝐢𝐬𝐬's world was different.
Fueled by a burning rage, she pushed her body to its absolute limits, even from a young age. She built walls around her heart, unable to form meaningful connections, fearing it would expose her weakness and the scars of her past.
As a result, her gratitude was a rare treasure bestowed upon a select few, and almost no one could confidently call themselves her friend. That's why this moment was so surreal for Hajin. The character he had written, who only ever knew how to apologize, had just said something that completely contradicted her very nature.
As the author of this world, he understood this better than anyone else.
𝐢𝐬𝐬 abruptly changed the subject, asking why he let Jong-hak's lackeys push him around when he was so clearly powerful in a real fight.
After all, a single shot from his gun had stunned that monster in its tracks. There was no way those bullies stood a chance against someone like him, so she couldn't figure out his angle. Hajin claimed he had no real way to defeat them completely, which sounded strange to 𝐢𝐬𝐬. She had witnessed him take down a monster with that very weapon.
He showed her his new gun, the Desert Eagle, explaining it was just a homemade trinket he used to get by. In short, he was desperately trying to downplay his own strength. 𝐢𝐬𝐬 nearly lost her mind hearing him openly admit to such a crime.
Modified weapons were strictly illegal at the academy and meant immediate suspension. Hajin confirmed that was precisely why he only used it when absolutely necessary.
Fortunately, he'd found a way to hide the gun inside his stigma, allowing him to store even more powerful weapons in his inventory without getting caught.
However, 𝐢𝐬𝐬 still wasn't buying his excuses, not after seeing his power firsthand. That's when she curiously asked if he possessed some kind of gift related to his marksmanship.
Hajin gave her a vague non-answer, but she seemed satisfied enough and left.
She wouldn't report him for the gun, but she strongly advised him to stop using it.
But just before she walked away, she stopped to bring up another topic, the very root of her hatred for him. Hajin remained silent, refusing to apologize or explain. He couldn't afford to form a bond with her, because he knew that if he apologized, she would forgive him.
And that would be disastrous for what was to come. After all, this man was secretly plotting to assassinate her brother.
He couldn't shatter her spirit by befriending her now, only to betray her later. His target was locked. Kill 𝐃∗ no matter the cost. When 𝐢𝐬𝐬 returned to her group, they were all eager to know if she'd actually made friends with him. She quickly denied it. But Sven's chilling expression suggested he saw something more. Suddenly, an announcement echoed through the dungeon. The training exercise was immediately suspended.
All cadets were ordered to evacuate at once. Talk about a late response.
If it weren't for Hajin, they would have been collecting bodies. Now, a whole host of problems from the raid exercise were coming to light.
First, all the surveillance cameras had been shut down right after the exercise began.
Then, real monsters, not artificial ones, had somehow infiltrated the dungeon, appearing in place of the dummies. Finally, The staff didn't react until the last possible second, when things went critical. It was a major incident, yet miraculously, there were no casualties.
That's why Cube opted for an internal investigation, instead of involving the authorities.
Hajin knew the villains lurking within Cube's administration had likely succeeded in covering the whole thing up.
He was certain a proper investigation wouldn't happen until Chapter 2 was completely over.
Right now, what truly worried him was the co-author's goal and his intentions for Sven.
There was a side effect to making a pact with a devil. It inflicted emotional anguish and obsession.
The worst-case scenario flashed through Hajin's mind. Sven, driven mad, murdering Naeun. He had to make sure that future never came to pass.
That's why he began secretly monitoring both of their movements.
Hajin opened his messenger app, silently apologizing for the unethical methods he had to use to get the results he wanted. The system linked him directly to Naeun's message account.
There, he saw a list of conversations with people like Suho, Sven, and Jong-hook.
But the only one that mattered to him was Sven himself, who was messaging her about joining a hunting club event this week.
In the original story, this was the exact moment Sven was supposed to go berserk. To prevent that disaster, Hajin planned to shadow them, prepared to do whatever it took to neutralize the threat.
He had also just boosted his stats.
So he figured it was finally time to raid the garrison dungeon.
During class, Hajin's smartwatch buzzed with a sudden message. He had no idea why Suho was calling him so unexpectedly.
Suho himself asked if our hero was free on Friday, as he had a favor to ask. The topic was Garrison Mountain.
It was a mountain in Gangwon Province, famous for its spiritual energies.
Often called a training paradise, it drew martial artists from all over the country. But they weren't the only ones. Garrison was also frequented by wanderers. People who preferred hiking through mountains for buried treasure rather than risking their lives fighting monsters.
And what do you know? One of these wanderers, a ginseng digger named Kim Yun-jin, would be joining our hero for this event.
Hajin was neither thrilled nor moved by Yun-jin's over-the-top enthusiasm.
Yun-jin confidently declared Hajin would never find ginseng with his methods. But Hajin corrected him, stating his goal wasn't ginseng, but something else entirely.
The man's constant rambling was seriously getting on our hero's nerves, so he simply chose to ignore him.
The arrogant Yun-jin assumed the kid lacked experience, and he was partly right, as Hajin stumbled multiple times along the path.
But in that very moment, he found it. A brilliant, glowing ginseng root. He couldn't believe his eyes.
The guy ended up devouring the 7-year-old ginseng root on the spot. Thanks to his modification ability, it would double his stat increase by 2 points for a short time.
The crazy thing about this ginseng was that if he had sold it, he could have made 700,000 won. I still don't get why he didn't use it to pay off his debt.
As Hajin trudged onward, he felt the strain of the long journey. It made sense, he thought, that the dungeon he sought remained undiscovered.
Here, in Garrison, beyond its magnificent facade, was the place he was searching for.
The Dungeon of the Immortal, a terrifying cavern the author himself now stood before. Its boss was called the Death Knight, a truly formidable mid-high tier monster.
The ginseng had boosted his stats considerably, but this creature would still shatter all of Hajin's expectations.
Stepping inside, Hajin declared he didn't care about the boss, as he had other objectives in mind.
Just then, a horrifying hand erupted from the ground. It was followed by a countless horde of undead monsters, crawling out to greet our hero at the dungeon's entrance. He readied himself to fight them all.
Hajin prepared his stigma's magic, reflecting that his true intent today wasn't to defeat the boss. The real goal was to reach the dungeon's hidden stage.
Suddenly, the entire skeletal horde charged, rushing toward the seemingly defenseless boy.
But they were about to regret their decision. Our hero drew his gun and blasted one of the undead monsters at point-blank range. What a stylish finishing blow! The same fate awaited the rest of the undead horde.
They were effortlessly taken down with every single shot. Hajin activated his eagle-eye precision skill to track the bullet's path. He then used his agility to leap over the monsters, only to rain down attacks from above, racking up more kills. After taking down enough of them, Hajin stopped firing and realized he'd defeated them all. However, the sheer number of these undead would surely increase as he neared the hidden stage. It was a clear sign he was heading toward 𝐷𝐸𝐿's location. This 𝐷𝐸𝐿 was actually a witch who served as the boss of the garrison dungeon's hidden stage. And this witch had a terrifying role to play in the future. She was destined to build 𝐷𝐸𝐿's castle, the most fearsome undead fortress in human history. She would use an abandoned school as its vessel and spread devastation everywhere. She would be incredibly difficult to handle once she matured and grew stronger. That's precisely why our hero wanted to take her down while he still could. After defeating her, he hoped to receive 2 item drops as a reward. The first was an upgradable piece of equipment called the Aether, and the second was 𝐷𝐸𝐿's seed. In the original novel, these 2 items helped the devil Thomer become so powerful, he became a key figure for the forces of evil. This meant that if Hajin wanted to grow stronger at an even faster rate, the Aether would be his greatest asset. He approached the door to the hidden stage, where only darkness waited. Activating his precision eagle eye, he could peer deep into the cavern without worrying about any lurking monsters. There, he saw a withered tree, shimmering with crystals growing from it. His target was the young, immature witch, incredibly vulnerable in her current state. Because defeating a fully grown witch was known to be nearly impossible. His only chance was now, while she was physically frail and far weaker than her future self. A little witch, playfully weaving her magic, lost in her own world. But to our hero, Hajin, this scene was but innocent. He had come here for one grim purpose: to prevent the future catastrophe she was destined to cause. His emotions were warring with his cold, hard reason. As her creator, he accepted the full weight of this burden, steeling his resolve to end her life. After all, even Thomer, the future leader of the evil faction, had been dealt with in the same way. Closing the distance, Hajin reminded himself that this little witch was nothing more than a product of his own creation.
He was the reason she existed, and he would be the reason she died. A normal spirit form witch couldn't be taken down by bullets, even those imbued with mana.
So, for this unique situation, Hajin activated the power of Stigma's hidden magic, forging a magic spear infused with the light attribute.
This would be more than enough to extinguish the witch in a single strike.
He was also seriously impressed by the effects of the aged ginseng, which had boosted his stats significantly. And believe it or not, the man hurled that deadly spear with every ounce of his strength, annihilating her spiritual form with a clean shot right through the head.
I never expected him to be so ruthless, but damn.
In any case, Hajin fully expected that attack to be the end of her.
But for some reason, she was far stronger than she appeared. Even in her immature state, she survived that devastating blow.
The witch used the last of her power to restore her shattered spiritual body.
The dungeon began to quake violently as the little witch finally lost her form, exploding into a cloud of dust right before Hajin's eyes.
At last, the two items he came for had finally dropped.
The seed of 𝐷𝐸𝐽, which held the witch's soul and would allow her to be reborn after germination. And another item that let its owner enhance their weapons and grow stronger.
After acquiring the ether item, it boosted all of Hajin's stats by 0.6 points.
The system also informed him that this item was now untradeable. Returning to his dorm, Hajin was thrilled to experience the item's effects.
His mission was a resounding success.
The ether's effect would only amplify his skills further as he leveled up. With all his current skills, he figured he was on par with the cube's cadets at his level. Not to mention, he earned nearly 50 story points and felt the full power of the ginseng.
But without a doubt, the best part of his raid was the seed of 𝐷𝐸𝐽 he'd obtained.
It could be used to resurrect the witch at any time through the process of germination.
Her title, the Witch of Despair, might make her sound like a villain. But if Hajin played his cards right, he could raise her to be a powerful ally. According to the author himself, cultivating this seed wasn't too difficult.
It sounds complex, but all it really needed was a bit of blood to grow over time.
The witch's personality would be determined by the blood of the provider. That's why it was crucial for Hajin to choose the ideal candidate. Our boy considered asking Suho and Rachel, hoping the witch would develop a kind personality.
On the other hand, he couldn't imagine asking Yona or Naeun, who would likely cause a scene and corrupt the witch's character completely.
That was a danger sign he was determined to avoid. The real question was, how would he even get their blood?
Hajin put the thought aside, deciding to get some rest. The main event was tomorrow, and it would demand all of his strength. After all, the hunting club event, where Sven was set to cause trouble with Naeun, was just around the corner.
The next day, at the Bayakpa Mineral Spring, a group of cube cadets buzzed with excitement for their first field orientation.
A girl stood before the cadets, giving a final briefing on the club's activities.
Hajin was part of this group, listening intently. The girl explained that the Leonidas Hunting Club would proceed with their hunt as usual, but she reminded them This wasn't just a hobby.
It was a solemn responsibility, aiding the public and the people of the province. While this was happening, Hajin was sweating bullets.
He had no idea what was about to unfold, or how events might twist and change.
All he knew was the simple outline from his original novel. Sivan's rage toward 𝐢𝐬𝐬𝐬 would leave her severely injured, while Sivan himself would be killed in the battle.
Hajin had written the story this way to allow Suho to grow closer to 𝐢𝐬𝐬𝐬 by taking care of her. The truly interesting part was that while everyone was focused on 𝐢𝐬𝐬𝐬 as the target, the defenseless Yona would become the true victim of the Jinn.
Hajin was extremely cautious and utterly horrified by this outcome, as it was a huge deviation from the original plot he created for the character Sivan.
Although he possessed a sliver of demonic power at his current level, he had yet to unlock his full transformation state.
Hajin hoped for the perfect storm. If Sven unleashed his fury right here, it would be the ideal chance to take him down with everyone else as a witness.
His gaze remained locked onto Sven.
But 𝐢𝐬𝐬𝐬 grew annoyed by the intense stare. She had no idea his eyes were actually tracking Sven's ever-sinister move. An unsettling thought then crossed her mind. Could this guy possibly have a crush on her?
The irony was palpable. Even Sven, now an object of suspicion, had warned her to be careful around Hajin.
But 𝐢𝐬𝐬𝐬 had dismissed his warning as a joke. After all, what kind of threat could this boy possibly pose to her? Sven clarified his warning, mentioning the recent string of disappearances and hinting that our boy Hajin might be involved.
However, 𝐢𝐬𝐬𝐬 had already developed a certain trust in him. She believed he was innocent, not the kind of person to commit such acts.
The hunt began. Sven and 𝐢𝐬𝐬𝐬 forged ahead, while Hajin trailed closely behind, his eyes never leaving them, ready for any sudden moves.
Time passed deep within the forest, where the life of an innocent deer was extinguished by a cruel, demonic force.
This brutal demon was none other than the scoundrel Sven, testing the limits of his newly acquired dark powers. He dropped the carcass the moment he heard 𝐢𝐬𝐬𝐬's voice.
She had made a kill of her own, but was absolutely stunned to see he had hunted far more than her with such impossible speed.
The guy just stood there like some innocent weirdo, while she remained completely oblivious to the monster standing beside her.
Sven declared his victory in their little hunting competition, and as per their agreement, he could now ask for anything his heart desired.
But when the moment came to state his wish, he fumbled his words, awkwardly trying to ask her out on a date.
As this cringe-worthy scene unfolded, our boy Hajin watched them both with razor-sharp focus.
He knew this was where the real trouble would begin. The demon Sven had contracted with was known as a succubus, a demon of carnal desire.
And so, anyone who becomes its puppet is relentlessly tormented by their own amplified lust.
This was why Sven couldn't control himself now. Still, he tried to man up and finally spit out the words.
He wanted 𝐢𝐬𝐬𝐬𝐬 to be his girlfriend. Hearing this, the girl froze on the spot, utterly speechless.
Her stunned and confused reaction made him wonder, was she actually about to reject him?
𝐢𝐬𝐬𝐬𝐬 confirmed his fears, explaining she couldn't imagine dating someone she had only known for a short while.
Her cold, direct words struck him like a physical blow.
Hajin thought this would be enough to trigger Sven's obsession, to make him snap and reveal his demonic nature. But then Naun added that she only likes men who are stronger than her.
If her previous words hadn't shattered his heart, that last line was a fatal blow to his pride.
And indeed, the man looked completely broken. They say the worst she can say is no. But this was far worse.
Naun, having made her point, simply tried to walk away.
But Sven didn't seem to get the message, asking if all he needed to do was prove he was stronger than her. A chill ran down her spine at his creepy words.
In an instant, a demonic hand lunged for her. Sven smashed the very ground where she had been standing.
He moved as if possessed by a feral beast, transformed into this monstrous new form.
But the reason our girl survived that devastating assault was because Hajin had intervened, amplifying her defensive shield with his own special equipment.
Just as he turned to ask if she was okay, Sven's claw pierced straight through him in one brutal strike.
In that split second of horror, Naun frantically reached for her weapon.
While Hajin struggled for every last breath in the demon's clutches, Naun instantly activated her condensed magic, severing one of the tendrils and demanding Sven release him.
The man had gone completely insane, rambling on about how much he loved and obsessed over Naun. His obsession only made his demonic form stronger.
Pure rage ignited in Naeon's eyes. As Hajin lay helpless, she unleashed her condensed magic. A brilliant green light erupted as Naeon reached the peak of her hidden potential.
In this world, some people are destined to choose weapons that don't align with their true talents.
And among those mismatched individuals,
Naun was at the top of the list. Her true specialty wasn't long-range weaponry. It was pure, unalterated magic.
she materialized a colossal sword with the full force of her power, demanding that Sven release Hajin at once.
Naun charged forward, unleashing a world-shattering attack on the demon. The aftermath was nothing less than utter destruction, starting from where she stood.
It tore the very ground apart, leaving even Naun herself in awe of her own power. Hajin couldn't believe what the hell he just witnessed. He thought to himself, did she just create a freaking lightsaber? Is she the last Jedi or something?
She was just as confused as he was, with no idea what had just happened. More importantly, Naun was worried about him.
Hajin insisted he was fine, but her condition was far more severe. That final, ultimate attack had completely drained every last drop of her strength.
Her vision blurred, and the world gave way as she collapsed. Hajin rushed to her side in an instant.
When she finally came to, she was mortified to find him carrying her. Overwhelmed with embarrassment, she demanded he put her down immediately.
Hajin knew that was a terrible idea. He was just trying to help, but this girl was far too proud to accept it.
He complied, letting her go, only for her legs to buckle beneath her. She crumbled to the ground once more.
Horror washed over Naun. She didn't even have the strength to stand. It was as if she'd lost all control of her own body. He gave her a knowing look, asking if this was her first time experiencing mana exhaustion.
From her shocked and breathless expression, Hajin confirmed his suspicion.
she'd likely never even heard of the term before.
He explained it's what happens when you burn every last drop of mana, leaving you utterly powerless. This meant she wouldn't be able to walk on her own for at least 2 days.
Hajin teased her lightly, wondering aloud if he should just leave her there. With no other choice, 𝐼𝐬𝐬𝐬 reluctantly accepted his help and climbed onto his back.
As they headed back, Hajin posed a question. Was she truly committed to the bow as her main weapon? He had witnessed something incredible during the battle.
𝐼𝐬𝐬𝐬 was confused by his words, but Hajin insisted she must have felt it too, a stirring of power from deep within. She had unlocked a new potential, a talent she never knew she possessed.
With that magical power, she could annihilate hundreds of monsters and fiends with a single sweeping strike.
In an all-out war, her power was nearly unstoppable with the talent she'd just awakened. It was this very gift that would one day earn her the title Supreme Ruler of the Battlefield.
But to walk that path, she would have to abandon her precious bow, the weapon she had cherished since childhood.
𝐼𝐬𝐬𝐬 felt a surge of anger. How could he possibly know what was best for her?
Hajin figured she'd stick with the bow for a while longer. He brought her near the portal, telling her she could make it the rest of the way herself.
Helpless, she watched him turn to leave, even pleading for him to stay.
But this guy was completely unfazed and just walked away. He wasn't some kind of simp.
The next day, news of 𝐼𝐬𝐬𝐬's harrowing ordeal spread like wildfire through Cube. They had even learned the identity of the Jin's master.
Hajin walked past the gossiping cadets, paying them no mind. He approached a door and opened it, revealing a gathering of the Academy's most prominent figures.
There was 𝐢 and even the class president, Jung-hak. All the key players were assembled in one place, and Hajin was now among them.
Now, let's rewind to the day before 𝐼𝐬𝐬𝐬's incident.
Suho had called our main character in on Friday because he needed to ask him a favor.
When Hajin asked for details, Suho revealed his plan to investigate the recent string of missing cadets.
The Academy had put him in charge of leading a special, student-led investigation team.
To prevent outside interference, the Academy formed an internal task force, using students from every grade level to finally catch the culprit involved.
The first-year representatives were all notable figures like Suho, Jung-hak, and 𝐼𝐬𝐬𝐬𝐬.
Suho added that while the Academy could have used its own team, they realized a more effective method.
To catch a perpetrator hiding among the cadets was to use the students themselves.
Hajin understood the logic, but he couldn't figure out why he was the one being asked to join.
To his surprise, he learned that 𝐼𝐬𝐬𝐬𝐬 herself had personally requested he be added to the team. That's why Suho decided to approach him.
And that's why Hajin ultimately went. Besides, it was a great chance to earn more story points.
This was a good turn of events for him. Suho began to explain that they needed to brainstorm how to approach the case.
He also wanted to present the theories everyone had so far. None of them believed the Jin incident involving 𝐼𝐬𝐬𝐬𝐬 was connected to their investigation.
But just as Suho made that point, Jung-hak exploded with rage.
Demanding to know if they were talking about the 𝐃𝐮𝐧𝐠, their very own classmate.
Suho was confused by his outburst, but Jung-hak insisted she would be the next target. His proof?
The fiend was taking orders through a jinn.
That meant the jinn who had made a pact with the fiend's master would likely continue to hunt 𝐌𝐢𝐬𝐬𝐬 using its other puppets.
Suho then asked if anyone else had a suspicious person they could add to their list.
It would be a massive help. Now Hajin himself already knew exactly who was responsible for the disappearances.
However, he was trying his best not to interfere with the story's original events. For that reason, he couldn't reveal the culprit's identity.
This was critical, because in the original novel, 6 cadets had vanished without a trace over 2 months.
But what was truly alarming was that in this current timeline, 3 cadets had already disappeared in just 2 weeks.
This meant the plot was accelerating, and more students could fall victim to this monster. Facing this crisis, and remembering how he'd saved 𝐌𝐢𝐬𝐬𝐬𝐬, Hajin was forced to make a harrowing choice.
While he wanted to let the story unfold at its own pace, doing so would place the people he cared about directly in harm's way. He refused to be a bystander to evil any longer. That's why Hajin's hand shot up, declaring he knew a prime suspect.
He named the man, that scoundrel, Hun,
the charismatic bastard and president of the study club. His sudden accusation plunged the room into a deathly silence.
𝐃𝐮𝐧𝐠 immediately refuted the claim, stating they'd already investigated the guy and found nothing. Jong-hak was especially scornful of the suggestion, scoffing at the idea that Hun was using mind control magic to lure his victims.
Hajin countered that he didn't know about conventional magic, but his suspicion remained unshaken. Suddenly, Yanha entered the discussion, turning her sharp gaze on our boy, Hajin. She found it rather odd that he was so quick to point fingers. In fact, rather than the club president, Yanha believed Hajin himself was the most likely suspect.
Hajin was completely stunned by her words. Let's rewind to the novel's beginning. Back when it was first created, Hajin felt the story needed a key side character for the protagonist.
This character, he believed, was essential to support Suho with a strong personality and complex interests. Happily adding her to the story, the author Kim Ha-jin named this character Yu Yen-ha.
And now we return to the present.
Yanha pressed her point, countering that Hajin was the real demon hiding among them.
Suho tried to defend our boy, explaining that Hajin had an alibi, having used a portal during the time of the incidents.
Yana shot back that she was merely making baseless accusations, just as our boy had. She thought it was meaningless to name the club president like that, especially when Hun's alibi was even more solid than Hajin's.
The author tried to regain control of the situation, but it had already spiraled. One of the other characters exploded, suggesting they all attack Hajin to see if he'd transform.
The situation had turned perfectly in Jong-hak's favor. This was the moment he had been waiting for.
Meanwhile, the color drained from Hajin's face, completely bewildered as to why all their suspicion had suddenly turned on him. He let out a bitter laugh, but instead of backing down, he roared at the other cadet, challenging him to make a move. If you really want a bullet in your head, I won't lie. I would actually enjoy it. I've got to say, I really love this side of him. Suwa tried to de-escalate their argument, while Hajin insisted they just ask 𝐌𝐢𝐬𝐬𝐬𝐬𝐬 to clear his name.
He was about to mention that they were together at the portal when Jong-hak suddenly hurled a basketball at him with full force. Enraged that Hajin had even said her name,
Jong-hak demanded to know why he dared to bring her up.
Hajin argued that when she was attacked by the demon, the two of them had joined forces to defeat the monster.
He even looked down on Jong-hak and his cronies for being so blissfully unaware of the obvious details of the case.
Jong-hak completely lost his temper, while the class president tried to calm him down. It was absolute chaos among the story's main characters. Having cleared his name, Hajin prepared to leave.
But just as his hand touched the door, the other cadet lunged, throwing a powerful punch. Hajin sensed his overwhelming presence and instantly dodged the blow, which completely obliterated the door.
Even Jong-hak was stunned by the sudden, ferocious attack.
The attacker, however, was in shock that Hajin had dodged his lightning-fast strike. Now truly enraged, Hajin drew his gun, ready to put him down.
The cadet charged forward to attack as Hajin prepared to open fire. Both were stopped by a single slash from the true protagonist, Suho. He thought Horak had crossed the line, and even believed Yanha was going too far, instead of simply asking Naun about her suspicions first.
She paused for a moment before reaching for her smartwatch.
Hajin stormed off in a rage as Yona learned from her call with Naun that physically,
Hajin could not possibly be the demon she suspected. Now that he was cleared, everyone in the room was not just ashamed, but utterly horrified by how terribly they had treated him.
Honestly, these bastards don't deserve his help.
Furious, Hajin went outside to clear his head. He was at a complete dead end, unable to understand why his new life was filled with so much suffering.
At first, he was a victim of the plot of his own novel.
And now he was forced to fight against the very characters he had poured his soul into creating. Unable to take it anymore, Hajin sank down in defeat, confessing he was just so tired of the world he was living in. He missed his real family back home, and let out his desperate wish to return to his own world.
Trivial worries, like his soon-to-be-expired lease, began to plague his mind, and he wondered if he had already been listed as a missing person back in reality.
And what about his parents? He wondered if they were okay, if they were out there looking for him. A tidal wave of emotions he had suppressed for so long threatened to break free. In this moment, he felt utterly helpless, fragile, and trapped.
There was no way back to his world, but he couldn't stop the burning desire for home that consumed his heart.
And just as the hero was wallowing in despair, a system window materialized, revealing his tenacity stat had increased from today's ordeal.
Hajin found it a bit meaningless, but he was still glad to see his resilience grow, even if by a little.
He knew that without that resilience, anyone else thrown into this world would have probably already taken their own life. Deciding to push aside his sorrow, he pulled himself together like a true champion. From a broken figure on the floor, a confident hero rose, ready to face this world once more. Now, let's check back on the other fool who made such a spectacular mess.
Yonggan asked where Hajin had gone, and Suho figured he just needed some space to himself. But Yonha knew better. That idiot Horak had just used his powers moments ago.
Furthermore, it was deeply suspicious how Hajin, a long-range specialist, managed to dodge a martial artist's attack.
This only deepened her suspicions about him. Suddenly, she received a message from Hyung,
asking to meet in the study room the next day.
Everything was happening exactly as Hajin had predicted. But despite her sharp instincts, this fool still accepted an invitation from a man who had literally just committed murder.
Hajin was beginning to understand why people say it's best to keep busy when you're feeling down. Since entering his novel, he'd been so consumed with training and hunting that he'd forgotten to dwell on what he left behind in the real world. He sat alone in silence, while his other characters, Suho and Yonghan, were clearly worried about him after the previous day's chaos. A flicker of frustration sparked within Hajin. He was trapped inside a story with characters of his own creation. He decided it was time to seriously start investing in a way to return home.
Na-yun returned to class, finally recovered, much to the relief of Jong-hak, who was deeply worried for her.
Suho offered to help her out, since she wasn't quite at 100% yet. But Jong-hak was a little possessive, and he wasn't afraid to show it. Hajin, however, was focused on Yonha, who sat as if completely unfazed by yesterday's events.
Class began with the instructor reminding them of the upcoming midterm exams. After the written exam, they would move on to the practical, where they'd be judged on 2 tasks. The first was a duel between cadets, while the second task would be a monster battle, using beasts summoned by mages. The instructor stressed that the difficulty for both would be far more intense than any of their usual training exercises.
Hearing this, Hajin wasn't worried about the written test. The only thing that bothered him was the duel.
Each cadet would be given 3 nomination cards used to choose the opponents they would face.
At first glance, it seemed like a system where top-ranking cadets could easily crush the lower ranks by targeting them.
However, Cube Academy had already thought of that, which is why they implemented a bonus scoring system. This meant that if a high-ranking cadet defeated a low-ranking one, they wouldn't receive many points. In fact, they could even have points deducted based on the rank difference.
But of course, this rule didn't affect everyone. Not someone like Horak, a simple-minded brute who fights first and thinks later. He was only focused on crushing Hajin, his one and only target. Besides that, something else was weighing on Hajin's mind.
Rachel had been acting strangely around him, always staying a little too close for comfort.
Hajin noticed she was always secretly observing him, when she normally kept to herself and studied alone.
He couldn't figure out her game. Was she trying to copy his work? Rachel peeked at his notes, only to see him happily writing his parents' names.
This just left the poor girl even more confused. The scene shifts to Yonha, where Hyung was eagerly waiting for her arrival.
Unaware of what this was all about, she approached the study room, where this charming prince was happily waiting for her.
She paid him no mind and quickly noticed that none of the other club members were there yet. Hyung insisted she sit, claiming they would arrive soon. That's when Yanya spotted a strange scented candle placed in plain sight.
Hyung made an excuse, saying he used it to improve his focus while studying.
He brought up her being part of the investigation team hunting the jinns responsible for the missing cadets.
Hyung himself was on a team, but claimed he hadn't made any progress. He wondered if Yanya had any significant suspects.
She claimed no one really came to mind. but at the same time, she couldn't help but remember a certain fool who spoke of baseless accusations.
Curious, Yona asked another question, but with a simple snap of his fingers.
Hajin seized control of her body, forcing a deep, hypnotic relaxation upon her.
Under his spell, she confessed the truth. One of her classmates believed Hye-young was a demon, using psychic powers on his victims.
Eagerly, Hyun asked if there was any evidence to prove it. And that was the moment the bastard slipped up.
You see, Yona instantly latched on to that one word, evidence. He tried to play it cool, claiming it was a mistake, but he was already sinking deep into her suspicion.
Yona readied her weapon, declaring that an innocent person never talks about evidence when they're accused of wrongdoing.
After all, they have nothing to prove.
With a crack of her whip, Yona struck Hyun, demanding he reveal his true identity. The charade was finally over.
The vile demon dropped his disguise, his true nature surfacing as he told Yona her turn would come soon enough. There was no need to rush.
The scene cuts, shifting to the second-year dorms. Here, Yona awakens, her consciousness slowly returning, only to find herself bound tightly.
Her eyes darted around the empty room, taking in every object.
She quickly realized this was the second-year dormitory. That meant Hyun had captured her, which also meant he was the hidden villain responsible for all the missing students. The final piece of the puzzle clicked. The foolish girl finally understood that Hajin hadn't been lying to her. But instead of blaming herself, she focused on escaping this desperate situation.
She struggled against the ropes binding her hands, praying for someone, anyone, to save her. But it was useless. He was already there, demanding she be quiet and obey. The scene shifts to our boy.
Hajin had just received a sudden message in the middle of the night. It was from Yona, which made no sense to him.
Yona had sent just a single number, 9, a message too cryptic for him to possibly understand.
Meanwhile, the bastard Hyun smashed her smartwatch, mocking Yona for sending a confusing message while fighting for her life. He also noticed the recipient was Kim Hajin, the very person Yona was supposed to be against. He figured Hajin's death was now inevitable. 2. Yona roared at him, swearing he would never escape justice for his crimes.
Especially with the investigation team hunting him down.
But the murderous Hyun just crushed her watch, reminding her that he had no interest in staying at the academy. He would simply kill her and leave.
Hearing his words, an unspeakable rage filled Yona. This, in turn, only amused the twisted bastard more.
He decided to summon the demon he made a pact with, Lilith. He wanted to watch her expression twist into pure terror. Let's go back to Hajin, who was still wondering what on earth Yona meant with that message. A storm of questions raced through his mind until suddenly he connected the dots. It was 911. Instantly equipping the Book of Truth, Hajin asked for Yona's current location. As the book revealed the answer, Hajin was stunned to learn she was in the 5th-year dormitory.
The scene returns to a collapsing Yona, now facing the disembodied voice of the demon, Lilith.
It whispered to her, sympathizing with the loneliness she'd faced her whole life. However, Hee-yun's psychic power wasn't strong enough to completely break her.
Yona glared back with furious eyes, proving her will was far too strong. She wasn't ready to cast aside her dignity just yet.
She resisted his mind control, so he took it a step further. Stroking her hair,
he declared that even the demon Lilith wanted her to submit to her charm. The girl struggled with all her might to break free from the psychic spell.
All the while, the monster Hoon gleefully remarked that there was no escaping Lilith's powerful magic, no matter how hard she fought.
Then, out of nowhere, a bullet tore through his head from the window. His brains splattered on the floor as he screamed in agony.
A familiar voice called out to Yona, mocking her for getting into this mess by refusing to believe his words.
The wounded demon cursed at his insolent attacker. Hajin cheerfully added that the bullet he just used was custom-made to his liking. This particular round couldn't be removed without proper surgery. There would be no simple healing from this wound.
Hee-yun flew into a rage, unleashing his demonic power and demanding Hajin reveal his location.
In his fury, he destroyed the entire room, even striking Yona in the process. But Hajin knew he was just wasting his energy.
He taunted Hee-yun, who still had no idea where the shots were coming from.
Our boy was ready to pull the trigger a second time, declaring that he was perched somewhere very, very far away.
He then fired 3 more shots, piercing the demon's body and slamming him to the ground. As his body collapsed, he finally saw Hajin's hiding spot in the distance.
He'd been taken out by a perfectly calibrated sniper rifle. Easy takedowns like this were why he loved long-range combat.
He then reminded Yona that he was about to waste all those precious bullets she'd given him.
He riddled Hun's body with more holes, figuring Yona could cover the expenses later. This man was truly terrifying the life out of the so-called villain.
Hun was convinced Hajin was more demonic than any actual devil. With another devastating shot, Hajin tore a fresh hole clean through his back.
By now, Hun was nothing more than a walking corpse, riddled with holes. Satisfied with his handiwork, Hajin decided that was enough punishment.
He checked on Yanya, but thankfully she was unharmed. He advised her to play unconscious, since the rescue team would be arriving any moment.
Her consciousness faded away as she whispered a final thank you to the man who had just saved her life.
Yanya awoke in a hospital room, finding Suho sitting by her bedside, peeling an apple for her.
Suho assured her that her physical condition was stable and she'd be just fine. But she couldn't help but wonder why he was here.
He explained that everyone from the team was taking turns watching over her, and now it was his shift. Yona couldn't understand why they were going to such lengths for her. Suho admitted that they all felt responsible for what happened. They were the investigation team, after all. Yet one of their own had been put in danger, while their focus was completely elsewhere. Suho offered a sincere apology on behalf of the entire group. Yona was left speechless, sensing a deep stubbornness within him.
This conversation gave her a surprisingly positive impression of him. Still, the misunderstanding with Hajin weighed heavily on her mind.
She timidly asked
if a certain someone had come to visit. But Suho was confused, and she was far too embarrassed to explain further.
Yanya decided to drop it, turning her gaze to the beautiful sky outside the window.
Later that day, a personal message arrived for Hajin. It was from Yonya, asking how she could possibly repay him.
Things were looking up for Hajin. He'd gained nearly 500 story points from the incident. On top of that, his mystic eye skill leveled up to 7.
Hajin realized this was the largest single gain of story points he'd ever received from a single event.
It seemed the effort needed to resolve a major story arc came with an equally major reward.
And even though he hadn't gone all out with his sharpshooting skills, they were more than enough to pull Yanha back from the brink of death.
Just then, a voice called out to Hajin. It was Agent Soo-hyuk, who seemed overjoyed that the young cadet had reached out to him.
The agent immediately dropped to his knees, desperately begging Hajin not to cancel the contract they'd signed. But for Hajin, it wasn't a big deal. He'd never even considered doing something like that.
Instead, he presented the man with a briefcase, calmly stating his interest in investing his own cash into the entertainment company.
The agent was floored by his words. So, let's break down Hajin's master plan here.
The ginseng root he'd found and sold online had netted him a cool 300 million won. He'd already sunk 250 million of that into Park Horse Master stocks, and now he wanted to invest 150 million into the entertainment agency.
Considering the company's massive growth potential, Hajin was certain it would yield profits just as legendary as Park Horsemasters.
The agent was completely speechless. He couldn't even fathom being worthy of such an enormous investment. Hajin simply told him to take the money, assuring him it was in the best interest of them both.
He then added a couple of requests: to purchase a magic bag and a high-end SUV for him.
After confirming the agent was older, Hajin told him to drop the formalities, but the agent couldn't bring himself to do that with his new, most important investor.
This prompted Hajin to casually wonder aloud if maybe he should just cancel the investment after all.
Now that got the agent's attention. He quickly agreed to drop the formalities and speak to Hajin casually.
As they took a stroll to a nearby convenience store, the agent was confused. He asked why Hajin was suddenly interested in lottery tickets.
But Hajin is always one step ahead. He knew he couldn't legally claim any lottery winnings without a guardian.
He wanted to put his ridiculously high luck stat to the test. And just like that, Hajin hit the jackpot, winning 1 billion won from a single ticket.
For perspective, that's roughly equivalent to $1 million. Hajin planned to invest this as well and told the agent to amend their contract. The agent accepted the winning ticket, clutching it for dear life, suddenly terrified that someone might try to rob him on the spot.
Meanwhile, in a shadowy warehouse, a spiritual entity materialized before its master. It reported that a certain group had finally begun to make its move.
The Park Horsemasters Guild was now officially listed. The leader declared their intention: steal one specific item and ignore everything else.
The spirit then mentioned that it had witnessed something peculiar.
It had noticed someone aggressively buying up the guild stock. At first, the person invested only 3,000 won. Then it jumped to 10 million.
And now, that same person
had dropped a staggering 250 million won. It was highly suspicious for an unknown individual to be moving that kind of money. But the leader was unconcerned, dismissing the report to focus solely on their primary objective. The spirit added one last report. New pages had appeared on the website, containing information on a group called the Relic Finders and the Truth Agency. Something about the Truth Agency felt off to him. He wondered if they should request the target's location, but the leader's sharp voice snapped at Run, warning him to quit messing around.
Rune remembered the midterm exams were also starting tomorrow. Everyone was buzzing about Kim Soo-ho and Shin Jong-hak.
June wondered if his boss was going to blend into the scene. It turned out she planned to make a move, hoping to find someone useful in the group, implying Kim Hajin. Some time passed, and the opening ceremony for the midterm practical exams finally began. Hazuki leaped up and threw her arms around her mother, overjoyed to see her after so long. During the practical week, it was explained that Cube was open to various recruiters, from guilds and associations to the cadets' own families. This created a massive crowd, making the atmosphere feel more like a grand festival. An announcement boomed, confirming Cube's status as the world's top hero academy for nurturing future talent. One of the top heroes, Leon, was making the announcement personally. But Hajin couldn't have cared less. He wondered if he should just wait a little longer. He had already taken the drones from Che Na-yoon and deployed them across the academy, beginning his own investigation for the intruder. While moving through the crowd, he accidentally bumped into a woman and apologized for his carelessness. This was the same woman from the secret warehouse, here to scout for talent. As he saw her face to face, Hajin's expression froze. He had completely forgotten about adding this character, who was supposed to appear during the practical exams. His look of pure shock and confusion made him stick out like a sore thumb. Hajin quickly averted his gaze, realizing he'd made the situation awkward. He scrambled to salvage things, trying to apologize, but what came out of his mouth was a compliment on her beauty. The woman stared back with a cold, emotionless gaze, confirming this idiot had just made things 100 times worse. She simply turned and walked away, without a word, as if he wasn't even worth her time. The woman vanished into the crowd and ordered Run to keep an eye on the person she just encountered. Because this individual had somehow recognized her despite her perception-blocking artifact, he was suspicious, and she wanted Run to investigate him further. The author reflects that it wasn't just heroes who came to greet the cadets. Among them was the Chunma team, another group within the guild. Their sole objective was to recruit either Soo-ho or Jong-hak, one of the highest-ranking cadets.
Soo-ho truly disliked their belief system, and he was eventually removed from their list of potential recruits.
After that, they turned their full attention to Jong-hak, just as it happened in the original novel. But the infiltration wasn't the issue that truly bothered Hajin.
It was the changes to the story that could spiral from these new variables, dragging the security heroes into the mess. The battle wouldn't end with just a few deaths, but far, far more.
Speaking of the security team, the heroes were growing frustrated, unable to find the suspicious individual. One of them, worried about how bad they would look
if an intruder slipped past them during the practical exam week.
By the way, these two heroes were 𝐤𝐤 and 𝐷𝐸𝐿, both ranked quite high within the association for their skills.
They were trying to eliminate a threat before it could erupt during the exam week.
Meanwhile, the suspicious leader's team was stunned that a boy could see through the Saren necklace, an artifact designed with a perception-blocking feature to conceal its wearer. The man was now genuinely intrigued, since all he saw around him were weaklings. As for Run, he couldn't understand this fool. All the guy ever thought about was fighting strong people, which is exactly what he wanted to do with Hajin.
He was ordered to stay calm and focus on the mission, as they were unsure of the boy's true abilities, or if he even posed a threat.
June also informed him that the dueling matches were about to begin. The second arena was packed with spectators, ready to witness the first match of the day. The duel was announced, and it was won using a nomination ticket. As Kim Hajin was walking, Yu Yenya suddenly blocked his path, asking if he was headed to the arena.
He confirmed that he was, since he was in the very first match. A satisfied Yunha had her servant present him with 100 first-class bullets, just as she promised.
Of course, he wasn't allowed to use any of these specific bullets in the test, but he could still put them to good use. She also offered to lend him more in the future, if he needed them. As Hajin took the case, Yanya clarified she wasn't trying to settle the score just because he saved her life. Instead, she wanted him to see it as a gift from her. She also told him that many people had asked her about the one who defeated the Jinn during the previous incident. However, knowing how precious his identity was to him, she decided to keep his secret safe.
Hajin was pleased, hoping she'd stay this way from now on.
He knew it would be a world of trouble if anyone discovered he was the one who took down that demonic beast.
Yona was unusually talkative today, even declaring she understood why Hajin hid his true power.
Yet she still believed he had no chance of passing the exam without unleashing that hidden strength. Her declaration left Hajin a bit flustered. She asked if he knew who his opponent was, and his surprised expression was all the answer she needed.
Meanwhile, inside the cadet waiting room,
A hulking brute was furiously pumping iron, hoping to completely crush Kim Hajin in the upcoming match. The scene shifts back to Yun, who was digging into Kim Hajin's past.
There was nothing remarkable about him. He was an orphan who eventually ended up in the military academy.
He was also a low-ranking cadet, with no special talents to speak of. The only standout detail was his colossal debt of 300 million won. Mulling over their last encounter, the woman wondered how he had bypassed her artifact's perception-blocking feature. She had no idea how it happened, and Yun was just as clueless. That same muscle-bound brute then decided to meet the leader of the chameleon troop.
She was annoyed that he'd run off somewhere before coming to her.
Jin-young tried to act cool, but she couldn't care less, simply asking what he had discovered. He claimed he saw no one of note in the group, just a bunch of weaklings getting in the way. Yoon found that obvious, but she wanted to know if any cadets truly stood out from the rest. Jin-young insisted that no one seemed remarkable. Yun explained that this year's freshmen were rumored to be exceptional, so she wanted him to investigate them instead. And then there was the fact
that Hajin's match was about to start. The very boy who saw through their captain's perception-blocking ability.
Back in the arena, high-rank heroes were snacking away, looking as carefree as possible, instead of doing their monitoring duties.
They were chatting about old times and family when a man suddenly caught their attention. It was 𝐃𝐮𝐬𝐬𝐬𝐬𝐬𝐬, sitting there with a strange, unsettling smile.
Was he some kind of hero fanboy? They wondered, noticing his distant gaze.
Regardless, the match was about to begin. 𝐷𝐷𝐷𝐷𝐷, the martial artist, was the first to enter the stage. His opponent was ranked as one of the Academy's worst cadets, Kim Hajin. The two fighters stood, facing each other.
Knowing he'd already provoked 𝐷𝐷𝐷𝐷𝐷, Hajin decided to taunt him, aiming for some serious psychological damage.
𝐷𝐷𝐷𝐷𝐷's special skill involved using his body's mana to create an invisible barrier. This was known as enhanced protective energy. This meant the guy was essentially bulletproof against practice rounds.
And not only that, he was a walking fortress, a mobile threat to any opponent foolish enough to stand before him.
This was the first match of the year, and both fighters were ready as the referee gave the signal. 𝐷𝐷𝐷𝐷, clearly the aggressor, made the first move.
Meanwhile, Hajin instantly activated bullet time to analyze him. He had also upgraded its duration from a mere 3 seconds to a full minute. The difference was insane. This would give him all the time he needed to keep up with 𝐷𝐷𝐷𝐷's frenzied movements. Or so he thought.
It wasn't enough to save him from a punch that shattered the arena floor and sent him flying. Even Hajin had to admit this guy was some kind of monster.
𝐷𝐷𝐷𝐷 launched a relentless assault, chasing Hajin down while destroying the stage piece by piece. Seeing an opening, the cadet finally drew his pistol. Hajin fired a decoy shot, letting the arrogant 𝐷𝐷𝐷𝐷 believe his opponent was foolishly underestimating his protective energy. He thought the incoming bullet would be deflected without any trouble.
But that's exactly what Hajin wanted him to believe. The bullet found its mark, sending excruciating pain through his shoulder.
𝐷𝐷𝐷𝐷 was stunned, just as confused as everyone else watching this match. A practice bullet, piercing, enhanced protective energy, was something completely unheard of. Only now did 𝐷𝐷𝐷𝐷 begin to realize who he was facing. After all, there was no way a mere bullet could penetrate his inviolable shield. His confusion turned to anxiety as he braced himself against the incoming rounds.
However, every single bullet that connected sent a searing wave of agony through him. Hajin almost felt sorry for his opponent, who assumed he could easily deflect the bullets. The truth was, these rounds were specially infused with the magic of his stigma.
They also possessed an anti-demon property, making them a force to be reckoned with. Hajin fired again and again, pushing 𝐷𝐷𝐷𝐷𝐷 into a passive, defensive corner. The crowd roared for the boy, but 𝐷𝐷𝐷𝐷𝐷 had seen enough. In a blind rage, he shattered the arena floor to stop Hajin's merciless assault.
Debris flew everywhere, forcing Hajin to reposition and evade. He then taunted his opponent before hurling a knife straight at his face.
Fearful, 𝐷𝐷𝐷𝐷𝐷 chose to dodge rather than deflect. Worried his opponent might have rigged the blade with some kind of device. However, it was just another brilliant tactic deployed by Hajin to fool his rival. The knife was a fake.
With 𝐅𝐢𝐬𝐽's guard now completely broken, Hajin unleashed another volley of shots, dropping him to the ground, unable to rise.
Hajin slowly advanced on the fallen fighter, pistol in hand. 𝐅𝐢𝐬𝐽's body trembled as the crowd watched in horror, wondering what the cadet would do next.
Hajin's finger rested firmly on the trigger, ready to end this match once for all. He was about to fire, while 𝐅𝐢𝐬𝐽 lay completely defenseless. But to everyone's astonishment, Kim Hajin ran out of bullets at the last second.
𝐅𝐢𝐬𝐽 may have been exhausted, but he somehow staggered to his feet, just as eager as before. But seizing the moment,
Our main character actually threw in the white towel and surrendered, leaving his opponent with the bitter aftertaste of both victory and defeat.
his sudden forfeit left even the pro-heroes completely stunned. The match came to an abrupt end, with the winner announced as 𝐅𝐢𝐬𝐽.
This kind of shameful victory didn't sit well with the brute, who roared for Hajin to come back. But our boy was far too calm to care, and simply walked off the stage.
After the duel, medics were shocked to find 𝐅𝐢𝐬𝐽's wounds healing at an impossible rate, despite being hit with live ammunition. Up with the high-ranking heroes, 𝐷𝐿𝐽 asked young Ji for her impression of the match.
She noted that the cadet Hajin was quite capable, while his opponent had made countless mistakes. If he had slowed down to press his advantage instead of rushing, he could have won. Despite her analysis, young Ji was obsessed with Hajin's performance.
He displayed phenomenal firing speed and demonstrated incredible eyesight to track and control the fighter.
And then there was the fact that as 𝐅𝐢𝐬𝐽 began to weaken, his opponent had perfectly matched his declining speed.
Young Ji wondered if Hajin possessed a gift that made him the perfect counter to anyone he faced. She was also concerned about the mana-infused bullets he used.
But to John 𝐢𝐞, this line of reasoning was ridiculous.
He knew for a fact that even mana-infused bullets weren't powerful enough to break through a reinforced protective barrier. Young Ji argued they still didn't have a grasp on all the gifts Hajin possessed to be certain. Then there was the possibility he was reinforcing himself.
From what young Ji had witnessed today, she was almost confident enough to declare that Hajin had the potential to become the greatest hero of all time. She burned his name into her memory after that remarkable performance.
As for Young, he had an inexplicable dislike for Hajin. He thought the kid was too weak and boring with his little handgun.
The captain's order to investigate his match only soured his mood. Jun explained that Hajin possessed demon-destroying power, which was reason enough.
But Chu Yang was still uninterested, thinking it was useless compared to raw strength.
Jun criticized him for being so petty just because Hajin was a long-range fighter. The warrior inside Jung believed a true battle involves the intent to kill your opponent. Jung scoffed, challenging the braggart to find any cadets who fought with that level of recklessness. He also asked if the fool had checked on their own cadets, Suho and Jung-hook.
Dong Nung-young confirmed that they were fine. He had seen Jung-hook's spear in combat and found his physical prowess quite commendable. There was also an aggression to him that put everyone on the defensive out of sheer intimidation.
Jun thought Young must have a terrible personality to be liked by someone like this guy. He then brought up Suho, whom he considered an oddball. Suho's match was a fascinating display of swordsmanship, as he moved with flawless sword lines in the heat of battle. His movements were sharp and refined,
but there was something about them that just seemed off to him.
Su-ho ultimately won the match, but Dong-Num believed he was likely suppressing his true nature. It was as if he was someone entirely different from who he appeared to be. Jun thought this confirmed Su-ho's combat ability was worthy of his reputation.
Still, Dong-Young wasn't particularly thrilled with either fighter so far.
Finally, he asked about Jen, whose very name was enough to make his blood boil.
John explained that the captain was interested in someone with magic resistance skills. Dong-Dung still hated the guy, but as he was screaming outdoors,
a guard seemed to have spotted them, reminding them that outsiders were forbidden in the forest and they had to leave immediately.
Annoyed at being discovered, young Diong approached the troublesome pest, intending to crush him like an insect.
A simple flick of his finger was all it took to obliterate the man's head as his body collapsed to the ground.
Hearing what just happened, Run asked if the idiot just cracked someone's skull. Young cheerfully confirmed that he had.
This move would surely infuriate the captain, causing them completely unnecessary trouble.
The scene shifts to the leader of the chameleon troop, lost in the haunting echoes of a tragic past. It seems she lost someone precious to her, and now lives for the day she can claim her vengeance. She assigns a new mission, to keep a close watch on her 3 chosen candidates.
However, the highest priority among them is Kim Hajin,
whose unique magic could be the key to shattering the mana decay. Her subordinate wonders if this is truly the right path.
After all, they know next to nothing about this man, but the leader is unconcerned, demanding only that the job gets done.
She resolves to meet Kim Hajin in person the very next day. On day 2 of the midterm exams, the arena buzzes with the same electric energy.
Scouts from the prestigious Swordblade Guild are present, and even the famed Sacred Grace of God.
The upper echelons have all gathered, hoping to recruit the promising new talents that emerge from these duels. According to Cube Academy's ranking system, Su-ho is set to face Yu Yen-ya, the Academy's 8th-ranked cadet.
Following that is a clash between Rachel and Che Na-yoon, whose ranks are nearly identical. This is truly a duel between the elites.
The first match begins, a battle between the 2 girls. Hajin watches from the stands, appearing to be just another spectator. But since he already knows the outcome, Hajin understands that Rachel is about to utterly dominate Na-yoon in today's match.
It all comes down to Na-yoon's critical oversight. She still hasn't changed her weapon. The 8th duel between the first-year cadets commences. Na-yoon sees this as her golden opportunity to finally surpass Rachel in the rankings as they stand on the precipice.
She looses a powerful arrow into the sky, which shatters into a devastating volley, raining down on her opponent.
Rachel calmly waits for the onslaught, effortlessly dodging arrow after arrow. But one projectile aims straight for her head, forcing her to masterfully deflect it instead.
Na-yoon is stunned by her impenetrable defense, especially as the close-quarters fighter relentlessly closes the distance.
The crowd absolutely erupts at this epic clash of titans.
Just then, the leader of the chameleon troop herself joins Kim Hajin in the stands, sitting right beside him. Her gaze is fixed on him, leaving him completely silent.
Our hero is completely frozen, at a total loss for words. So, let's finally delve in to who this mysterious woman really is.
This woman is one of the most wanted criminals in history, the infamous captain of the masked organization.
She is a true mastermind of the underworld, operating under countless aliases. Her true identity remains a complete mystery to the world.
But just as this enigmatic woman is about to greet our hero, some clumsy fool spills an entire glass of cold water on her.
It ruins her hair and shatters the tense atmosphere. Even Hajin is left completely stunned.
The man offers a frantic apology. The match's conclusion missed in the chaos. Rachel was victorious, just as Hajin's novel predicted.
Regardless, he offers the woman his handkerchief. Having already witnessed his duel, she finally gets to the real reason she's here.
Impressed by his performance, she offers him a business card, a direct line of contact.
She then probes, asking if the power he wielded was some kind of special authority.